and that's like barely a drop in the bucket. But I want to leave you with some practical skills that you can take home, and if you already have been working in the lab, hopefully I can give you some newer techs to really like transform your skills and save you a lot of time and energy and money, because that's the end goal, you know. Cool, so I want to hear from everyone, maybe your name, experience in the lab or in mushrooms in general. Totally fine if you have zero, or if you know you work at a mushroom farm or in the lab a lot. And then one thing that you want to learn today. So we can popcorn or go around. Who wants to start?
My name is Lou.
Hey Lou.
And I came here a couple of weeks ago for the maintenance get together. So we helped set up a few things in the area and whatnot. And my experience with mushrooms is very limited. My brother Andy has started working with mushrooms within the last year, I would say. And his excitement that's what got me here. So I'm just enjoying starting learning about mushrooms and following him around, and hopefully his knowledge will trickle down to me, you know, eventually.
Great. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And just FYI for future, we're like running a little short on time, so maybe like keep it pretty quick, so we have time to like jump in and practice culturing some stuff.
I'm Andy. Haven't done any lab work yet. That's the next phase, I think, that I'll be getting. So, glad to be here. Thanks.
Great.
My name is Dominic. I don't have much experience in cultivating mushrooms, but I'm hoping to learn something I can use at home.
Great. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Yara. I'm very new at cultivating mushrooms. Actually, me and Dan are currently working and setting up a lab, so we've gotten as far as a blood box and some other stuff that are plates. So still working on it.
Hi, I'm Madeline. I'm from Kansas, and I cultivate mushrooms for Walker's Farms, but the whole lab side is a little bit new to me, so I'm here to develop those skills.
I'm Scotty. I'm a horticulturist, so I've got like plant lab work, which can switch over, but I do a little home mushroom lab stuff, a little bit.
Hi, my name is Dan. I have some experience doing chaga and reishi tinctures. Recently started working with Yara, doing our first lab. Played around with some agar plates, learned how to use the autoclave, and looking further to improve our knowledge on that.
And this is also really important if you see anyone in this group, you're like, oh, I gotta talk to you later. Networking is super important. Even I think it's more important than any of the classes, it's the people here and the networks that we create. So awesome, thanks everyone for being here.
My name's Ashley. I've done some growing, just kind of home growing here and there. I did actually a fair amount of heavy bio stuff at the beginning of my college career before I decided to be a music teacher. And now I'm kind of circling back, and as I'm learning more, this is definitely an angle that I'm excited to dive back into.
Cool, thanks.
I'm Bob. My lab experience is kind of limited to electronic stuff, but I've I've been growing shiitakes on logs for about 10 years and chasing the elusive morel for about 18 years. And this year I pressure cooked some logs to grow maitake, and I need to know more about what's important in terms of sterilizing and which ones are strong enough to need it and not need it. And
Great, thanks.
I'm Daniel. I have a little bit of lab work experience back in school, like biochem stuff, and I'm a mushroom enthusiast, really interested in farming the woods and working with horses and all those things. So.
My name's Carrie. I have really
experience, which is really low tech stuff, but I think growing on agar is really important for purposes of remediation. So that's why I'm here.
Name's Ryan. My lab experience is college. I'm a biochem major. I've yet to grow any mushrooms, so just learn about that.
My name is Allison. Yeah, my lab experience is just from college and biochem. Yeah, I know how fungi resonates with my heart, and I'm really here to delve into the science of it. Just learn how to cultivate, how to truly integrate that into my every day.
Hi, I'm Envy. I live in New York City, so I'm trying to figure out like space, and also like having a home lab. So that's interesting to me, or not even a lab, just like a space to begin exploring the relationship of cultivating with mushrooms, because I feel like, I feel like it's a strange ethical thing for me to subject them to sterile environments. So I'm curious about that aspect of it as well. But yeah, I love fungi. It's cool.
If you look on the schedule, there's a workshop for DNA barcoding with Craig. I don't know if you know him, but he lives in New York and he has a lab space. It's like pretty community based. And there's a couple in New York City that you don't need to build your own. If you like work with them, it's like a community based lab.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I also live in New York City, but at some point I probably want to leave and I don't know, start like an eco village, and probably want to have a lab there. So kind of thinking about that. Yeah.
Hi guys, my name is Nick. I've been working at a startup in Rochester for a few months where we're growing blue oyster and maitake right now, but my experience is pretty limited. So.
I'm Mike. I've had a couple of years experience with a HEPA filter, graduated from still air box, and I just want to keep learning more. That will keep me cleaner.
Great. For any people that just walked in, we're saying our name, experience with mushrooms, particularly lab skills, and what we want to learn today. And just keeping it pretty quick.
My name's Adam. I attended Will's lab cultivation class last year. Mainly doing just low-tech stuff since then. Have a little bit of experience in the small family farm, indoor gourmet mushroom grow.
Yeah, you can pop it on the table. Actually, over here.
My name's Jess. I have a little experience doing outdoor cultivation, Pinchiferia and indoor Pinchiferia, and different forms of psilocybin and oyster and lion's mane. Excited to learn about AR and some other techniques for safe strains.
I'm sorry, I just need to make an announcement. I'm sorry to interrupt. Is anyone parked in this black Subaru right here from Connecticut, AL something? No? Okay. Thanks.
I'm Cameron. I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Most of my experience is in outdoor cultivation as well, actually. Psilocybin and some psilocybin resistant iodine. And some oysters as well. But yeah, just here to learn more about the actual technical aspects of it, because I've basically only just taken things from the wild and propagated it and spread it.
Yeah, and everyone can share where they're from too. I totally forgot to say that, so we can be like, "Oh, I'm your neighbor," kind of thing.
Hey, I'm Link. I grew up in like Newburgh, near the Hudson River, but I've been living in San Francisco for the past few years. Doing a little bit of like indoor and outdoor mushroom cultivation, just like some psilocybin, some lion's mane, and some oysters. But there is a lab near me in Oakland that I know does a lot of awesome stuff. So I want to get a little more in touch with them and figure this would be a good primer for like the agar and other stuff like that.
Is that BAM?
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
BAM, and then there's Counterculture Labs,
Yep.
which is pretty rad. Out of
Pretty
Oakland.
sure they're in the same space.
Yeah,
They're, like, right there. Yeah.
Yeah, they're tight.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm Tanya. I live in Suffolk, New York. I really have no experience cultivating mushrooms. I'd love to learn more about it. Love mushrooms, love mushroom medicine. I'm currently studying in herbalism school and wanted to add to my studies this weekend, so I'm here.
Hey, I'm Anna. I'm from Philadelphia. I have no mushroom growing experience, but I am a farmer and an environmental educator, so I would like to cultivate at home and I would like to teach kids how to do it.
My name is Emily. I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I have no experience cultivating mushrooms. I've been studying herbalism and been a mushroom enthusiast for probably 5 years now, so that's what I'm here for.
I'm Julian. I'm from Spring Valley, New York. I work on a biodynamic farm there. I started doing some outdoor food farming and a little bit of indoor oysters. Yeah, that's where I left that.
So did anyone not speak and wants to? Totally welcome to hold your peace.
My name's Jess. I'm from Pittsburgh, and I don't have any experience with cultivation. Love mushrooms, love eating them, love medicinal properties, love finding them and playing with them. I have experience with growing food, but yeah, I really want to bring in the cultivation of fungi and mushrooms and stuff.
Great. Is that everyone?
My name is Jay. I like growing mushrooms. I've been doing it 15 or 20 years, something like that. And really stoked that you're holding space for this right now. It's awesome. Thanks for doing it.
So Jay was one of my first mushroom teachers of all time, and he's going to be here, and if you have any questions as well, go to him. He's a wealth of information, OG in the mushroom field.
I've become OG status at this point. That's awesome.
So the first thing I want to say, don't make your lab outside. This is just like a demo, don't do what we're doing here. And I also want to say that you don't need to do lab work to grow mushrooms. There's plenty of mushrooms that you'll never be in a lab, and you can grow like 500 pounds a week and don't need a lab. You know, you can grow abundance of Stropharia, of oyster, of all these different species, and there is the option of, you know, working with another farmer who makes the spawn, or even buying in pre-made grow blocks, which a lot of farmers do, and they buy hundreds of blocks a week, and they just fruit them out, sell them, so they don't have to do a lot of the work. Mushroom cultivation is a lot of work. A lot of people say it's the second most labor-intensive crop. But it's fun. It's juicy. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it. And it's fun to like get into the mycelial mind and work on the mycelial level, on the spore level, because that's, you know, that's the mother. That's the the real organism. Yeah, but it's also fun to eat and work with, you know, medicinal mushrooms with herbalism and things like that. So this class is directed at you, so I want to hear also, like, please jump up and say, like, I want to learn more about, like, making grain spawn or more agar work. We're going to have space at the end where we're going to practice cloning mushrooms on agar. And this is important if you like to forage mushrooms and you find one, like this is squirrel tooth. If you find like a reishi or a cordyceps or oyster, and you're like, I want to, you know, cultivate this. I like to describe it as like a copy and paste. You find something cool out in the woods, maybe it's endangered, and you want to not over harvest it and you want to grow it, so more people can share in the food or the medicine. And there's many different ways to go about lab work, and it always is like 2 words: it depends, and that's like everything, for sure. This is a flow hood, but you don't need one. A lot of people use a glove box. I heard that a couple of times. And a glove box is basically like a plastic tote with armholes in it. And it could be like, you can, weld gloves onto it. You can do, a couple different techniques to make it like a still air box. So wind and other spores from the outside are not getting into the box. And that's pretty cheap. A lot of people work with that. Here's another method that a lot of, growers in the US are starting to get really into. It's called liquid culture. And this I can do on my kitchen counter. I don't even need a glove box. A lot of people still use a glove box, but you take a syringe, and basically this is just sugar water. And I'm going to pass this around in a second, but all these little chunks floating in there is mycelium, is your culture. Mycelium is the roots of the mushroom, and there's a coin at the bottom. You can use a marble to break up the mycelium. Some people use magnetic spinners to break it up. That's like the best way. And then on top here, a lot of texts online and in books will tell you this is like an injection port. You can buy it or just make your own with high temperature silicone. You let it dry and you can stick a syringe through to pull up the mycelium. And then this is for air exchange. So a lot of people will say use polyfill, use like pillow stuffing, and stuff it in the hole. I used to do that, and then I learned very quickly that that's not the way to do it. And every time I brought like all my liquid culture in a car, because I was driving to a lab, and like I hit a bump, and that happened. And then the polyfill got wet, and bacteria can travel through the wetness into the jars, so I just lost all my liquid culture. Had to turn around, and it was like, they're all so I learned, the hard way of, not to use polyfill. So I learned that I can use this syringe filter. And you can get these super cheap, and you basically drill a hole and you plop it in. Now I can do that. And I can take it on the road, I can like shake it up like that, I can do a bunch of different stuff. And this saved my life. So if you are getting into liquid culture, definitely use the syringe filter. This is a 0.22 but different sizes can work.
What about Tyvek?
Tyvek I think is the same, that it will get wet, but I could be wrong.
Can you tell us a great place to order those in bulk?
Yeah, I got this off Amazon, but you can probably go to a lab supply store. If you want to get it in super bulk, Google is your friend, for sure.
Is there any drawbacks to just doing precautions?
Yeah, good question. So this is a technique, I use both. I use petri dishes and liquid culture. The drawback is it's hard to tell contamination. So I've done this mistake a lot of times where I have a whole jar of liquid culture, and I'm like, oh, that looks clean, and then I transfer it to a bunch of stuff, and a couple days later, I'll get like lipstick mold or like some crazy stuff, and I'm like, I gotta start over. And that's, part of mushroom cultivation, you will grow mold. And a lot of people, like, I'll talk to, they're like, I'm like, oh, you grow mushrooms? And they're like, I'm more of a mold farmer. But, and it's part of it. It's like, mushrooms are good teachers in decomposition. And we need to, like, get into the depth of things and the mold and, like, making compost and like really live in it. Just like, all right, that's part of life. But for mushroom cultivation, we're not trying to do that, but it's just part of it. And don't get discouraged when you do this stuff and you get contamination, because it does happen, and it's just more emphasis to start over and learn from your mistakes. So I kind of want to go through like a way from the beginning.
I had a question on your lids.
Yeah.
Are they polypropylene 5? Or
Yeah, these are polypropylene, so I can stick them in a pressure cooker. So I'm going to pass this around, and I'm going to talk more about how to make it in a second.
They are actually HDP. Is that the volume?
Yeah.
Seriously? Yeah. They could just handle it with really low voltage. At least that's what I thought.
So a lot of you, if you want to start with a culture, you have a couple different options. So what's one option if you want to grow mushrooms and you want to start with some spawn, or you want to make some culture?
Cardboard.
Cardboard? Okay. Before the cardboard, what do you put on the cardboard?
Mycelium.
Mycelium? Where do you get the mycelium?
You can rip it off a kit.
Yeah, okay, so a kit, you can buy your mushrooms. Or are you saying mycelium from a kit in the inside? Great, so those are two options. You know, you can start with a mushroom, you can get it at a grocery store, you can, you know, forage it in the woods. A little bit of sterile mycelium that you can buy. And that comes in many different, you know, forms. So you can get a liquid culture online, you can get a petri dish. You know, you can get grain spawn, you can get a bunch of different things. So, bot culture. And from here, you have the option, you know, if you want to skip this step and you just want to do logs, you can buy spawn, put them into logs, wax them up, call it a day. Or if you want to do Stropharia, you buy your spawn, put it in wood chips, call it a day. But if you want to do some more work, then we'll use a lab. Another thing is spores. So you can get a spore syringe or spores from the mushroom. Now I'm going to talk about the difference between spores and mycelium. So spores have half the genetic DNA required to make a fruiting body. And there's a lot of different genetics in spores. So if you get a multi-spore culture, you're going to have tons of different genetics. Your mushrooms at the end will be all different sizes and shapes. Mycelium is like, you know, those genetics. So some people want to take spores to get desired genetics, and once they grow that out, they'll take the mycelium or the spores from the biggest fruit body, etc. Or for microremediation, they'll introduce that culture to a contaminant and then get the one that's more vigorous to select strains that are better for you. And that's important for buying a culture. How do you know if it's good? A lot of times, you know, you want to go with a commercial strain that a lot of people are growing. That's, you know, you've seen pictures online. You get these big fruits, and I know a lot of growers who actually, you know, patent their strains, and they'll get it DNA barcoded, and they'll sell it for like $300, and yeah, you like can't use their strain. And I know a lot of growers who just buy one of their kits and then just clone their mushroom, and like, you know, they'll use it, but then a way to get around it is they'll fruit it out, take spores, and then use those new spores. And those are different genetics, but coming from the same patented mother. Cool. So those are different ways. And we can take these cultures, and I like to put them on petri dishes first. So you'll have your like master culture, and that one you keep stored away and you keep it safe, because if anything happens when you're doing transfers, you want to have one backup, and hopefully like a few backups. Some people make slants with a popsicle stick in the agar, and they'll keep it in the fridge. And once the mycelium starts growing on the agar and starts eating all the nutrients, they have the popsicle stick to kind of like have extra food. And Jay, uses popsicle sticks for other stuff. They're fun. Eat popsicles, use them. So if you're gonna use liquid culture, you can definitely, I would definitely check it with agar. So if you make a jar of liquid culture, I would squirt some on the on the agar to check if it's clean. And agar, it's agar. You can buy it at like a grocery store. And basically it's the same thing as a liquid culture. It's like a sugary or a nutrient broth that's kind of gelled or solidified with the agar. So there's tons of different recipes. I have a bunch in my book. There's tons on the internet. You can put like dog food in it. You can put all this crazy stuff in your agar. And that's important, not to use the same recipe over and over and over again, because mushrooms senesce. So they start to just kind of like fade out. Imagine eating oatmeal every meal for the rest of your life. It sucks. I would like start to senesce too. So it's good to like, if you have a bunch of cultures in your fridge, a lot of people do it every year. Some people do it every month. Depends what you're growing. Cordyceps militaris is what I grow, and that senesces a lot quicker than a lot of other mushrooms. So I have to continually make new recipes with different food. They have more of a gourmet diet, so they like more 5-star meals all the time. They're more finicky.
Do you think it's because of Synascomycin?
I think so.
Okay. Just curious.
What did you say?
Could OG speak louder, please?
I was asking Alex if a lot of the mushrooms that we grow are what we would call basidiomycete. So their sexual reproduction state at a microscopic level is different than say a morel or a cordyceps, which would fit into the ascomycete group. And so the way that they sexually reproduce and form a mushroom is actually quite different on a microscopic level. And so that plays into culture storage and kind of culture longevity quite a bit. So I was just curious what his thoughts were on that.
Thank you.
Great. Some people don't use agar to test their liquid culture, and they just kind of cross their fingers. Some people just buy, a pre-made syringe offline and use that. There's infinite ways to grow mushrooms. And don't listen to anyone that tells you this is the only way. Because, and a lot of people, I'm shocked seeing a lot of people use these really low-tech techniques. That blows my mind how they can grow so many mushrooms without sterile techniques and being super dirty. I've seen people like inoculate shiitake without a hood right next to a pig, and like they had very little contamination. When I went to Oaxaca, like I was inoculating oyster, lion's mane, like all these different species on pasteurized sawdust, just open air, like outside. And people were like putting manure on their farms, and it was wafting in the air and you can smell it. And we're like, this is all gonna get contaminated, like how is this possible? Just like out in the open, and they tie it up, and I didn't see contamination. So, it's mushroom cultivation is really new, and we're learning different techniques. That being said, there is some things that you do need to be super sterile. So we'll talk about like building a lab. We're at this stage where we need a lab. Talked about a glove box. This is a flow hood. And basically you're trying to minimize contamination.
Can you just like back up real quick? If you wanted to use like that liquid culture, how do you go from like a mushroom I forage to that?
Totally. There's a couple different ways. There's a method of wiping the outside of the mushroom with alcohol and sticking the syringe through the mushroom with sterile water in the inside, and then squirting it into this jar. You will need a pressure cooker to sterilize your jar and your sugary water. And hopefully the sterile water inside the syringe. Another method is to clone. Say we're working with this mushroom. We'll do it in a second. Clone it on agar. Let it grow out. And then basically like cut a crescent shape into the agar in front of the hood or in your glove box. Cut a bunch of pieces. Everyone see that? Scoop it up, plop it in that jar, the liquid culture, and all the little pieces will float around and the mycelium will grow out in your liquid culture. And once that's grown out, it should take like a week, and then you test it with your triplets.
If you're doing that low tech, just shaking it up with a nickel in the jar, how often daily would you have to do something like that?
Once daily for the first week is great, and after a week it should be fine to do it like maybe once a week or once every couple weeks after that. It depends on the culture, and yeah, sometimes I get mine clumped up a lot. It's all like depending on species and your formula. Of like how many nutrients you give it and different things like that. So I think it's all by eye. If you start seeing it clump up, shake it. And if not, then don't worry about it.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
I think in my perspective, a lot of it has to do with your end goal. If your end goal is to multiply the fungus a lot, like for production, then hypofragmentation by blending the fungus up and actually agitating it on a stir plate for 5 to 7 days the whole time won't let it clump up, and it just multiplies on a micro scale, and its vitality is much higher. But if you're shaking it in the jar just to maintain it because you maybe don't want to do petri dishes or aren't in a spot to do that for some reason, it's a low vitality maintenance type of growth is the way I would think about it. So it kind of depends on your end goal.
Yeah, the stir plate is definitely an upgrade, but you can get away with the coin or the marble. The stir plate allows it to break up into the micro filaments.
Just curious for storage, we have a lot in our fridge and they're like a year old. I'm just wondering, like, feeding them, obviously testing their viable on agar, but what's the deal with like long-term fridge storage and keeping them viable?
Depends on the species. As I was talking about with Cordyceps militaris, a lot of people say it sinensis in 6 months. I had luck with growing it over a year, but it didn't do so hot. So it definitely depends on what the original substrate is. If it's super nutrient dense, if you have a popsicle stick in there, whatever. Yeah, it depends what temperature your fridge is at, etc. But as I was saying, you want to switch it up, give it new food. It depends.
So if you're maintaining several in the fridge, it's almost like you have to keep rotating and checking that they're alive and doing well.
Yeah, a lot of people, like if you're a grower and you're going to use your liquid culture, you can just leave it out at room temperature. A lot of people love to just like stock their fridges with it. But if you're gonna use it right away, like don't take up your fridge space. You can leave it out.
A couple days.
I've left it out for weeks and it's fine. As long as it doesn't get too hot. You can leave petri dishes out. They just eat through their food faster. And the fridge, like putting cultures in the fridge is just to slow it down. And yeah, But I rip through liquid culture. I go through a lot of jars really quickly. So I just leave it out. I don't have fridge space for all the jars I have. I have dozens and dozens of jars, so I need like massive fridges. It's like a lot of electricity. You don't want to do that. Yeah, so let's talk about this hood. What is this? HEPA filter, yeah. Inside is the HEPA filter. This whole box is a flow hood, and you'll see it in many different shapes and sizes. Sometimes the filter's on top and it's blowing down. Sometimes it's this way. Sometimes it has like a whole encased edges and roof.
That'd be the hood.
That'd be the hood part. There is like this fan in the back if people want to check it afterwards. And basically, and sometimes it's on the top, so it'll suck air and push it through this HEPA filter, which basically, there's different grades of different filters, but it filters the air to 0.03 microns at 99.97% efficiency. And basically, no spores, no bacteria can get through and land on your working area. And I use a pre-filter, so any like big particles in the air gets caught in the pre-filter, and that you can get for a couple bucks pretty much anywhere. It's like a carbon-based filter. And you can build your own. I built a lot, but I don't recommend it. It's pretty costly, and a lot of times the hood you build is like not that great. And I got this one for $130, shipping included, and it works awesome. It works super well. It's all metal. A lot of times you build it, it's made out of wood, and it just takes a lot of time, and like it's not that great. It's big and bulky, and it's heavy, and like you can't really transport it. So look on eBay. Definitely do your research. Get it from a verified grower. Verified seller. But yeah, this seller, I forget his eBay name, but he sells a lot for like really cheap. And they're all metal. They're all like pretty durable. And they work great. Like I can hold a flame out here and it's still blowing pretty well.
So would you do your work like right in front of that? Is that hanging up above you?
Yep, just like this.
Yeah.
We'll use it in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is an investment, and if you're buying a flow hood, then you're gonna buy a lot of other stuff. You're gonna be doing a lot more work. So this is an investment if you want to do more advanced skills. So I don't want everyone to be like, oh, I gotta go home and buy like a hood and like buy all this stuff, and it is bulky, and sometimes you don't have space or the resources, and at the end of the day you don't need it for a lot of the things that people want to do. But if you want to start your mushroom farm, a lot of times you also don't need it, but you can do a lot of fun stuff in front of the hood. So yeah, I made the mistake of just bringing this. I wanted everyone to see it, but this is my like commercial hood that I use, and I'm not too happy that it's like in the rain and like dirty. But I want everyone to like be in front of it and use it and etc. So yeah. So once we have our master culture on Petri, we can go and make like a bunch of other cultures. And basically, if you keep giving mycelium food, it will continue to grow forever. It's an organism that I think fruiting is kind of a defense mechanism. I think if you think about it, a mushroom is a fruit body a lot of times, just to spread its DNA, just to get more food. And a lot of times it won't fruit until it's like reaching a time where it's running out of food. So if you keep feeding it, it'll grow forever. If you take a clone, it's basically the same DNA as the last one. So it's copy and paste, copy and paste. And it's good to have a ton of backup cultures and also keep them in different fridges. I have lost all my cultures one time just because the fridge like froze and then burnt out and then warmed up to like a sauna in there and then froze again and then warmed up like a sauna and all like the agar in there was water and it was like really gross and smelly. So keep cultures at different fridges if you can. If you have a friend's house, you can have a little spot or whatever. It's really important if the power goes out or anything happens to have backups.
When you break up the master culture, is that when you put different nutrients in the other petri dishes to prevent senescence?
Yeah, it's
Right.
always good to have a backup because every time you make a culture or make a new progression, it'll start to lose vigor. So it's good to like go back to as close to the wild mushroom as possible and have those backup genetics. So, you know, you can take these agar, and a lot of people go to agar to grain. But you can go agar to liquid culture. You can do a lot of different things depending on your end goal.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Do you do water culture or dry?
No.
For backup?
Yeah.
Because you don't need a fridge for that stuff.
Yeah, you want to talk about it?
Oh, well,
Can you
some of
speak up, please?
yeah, sure. I didn't want to be. I didn't want to interject loudly. Sorry. There's alternatives to sticking your culture in the fridge for backup. You could dry culture it, which is a technique that we use a lot on our farm now. Basically we're using a filter paper and getting it wet and sterilizing it, putting it on a new petri dish, just like as if you were going to pour agar onto it, and then take your clean culture and grow it out on the filter dish, and just like it was a petri dish. Then you can untape it and leave it in front of the flow hood to desiccate it, let it dry back for a few days, and it'll store dry. And you can just rehydrate it by cutting a piece off and putting it on a new petri dish. It works for most of the Basidiomycete, or like most of the mushrooms that you would want to grow. If it decomposes wood, it usually holds up on cellulose filter paper. And so it stores for years. It's how a lot of archivists do it. Another method is to take a cutting of the petri dish in small pieces and put it into a small vial of sterile water so it stays hydrated. And it works really well for long-term storage. You can usually get a couple years of just leaving it on top of a bench in room temperature. The culture is going to slow down dramatically with any of these backup culturing techniques, no matter what they are. So expect to have to wake it back up on a new petri dish anyway, but it's alternatives to a refrigerator. It kind of skirts around the technical issues sometimes.
Yeah. Talking also on dried, I like cloning from dried mushrooms more than fresh. A lot of times. There are some exceptions, but a lot of times I dehydrate my mushrooms and then I clone it. And that works a lot better for me. There are some theories that once you dehydrate it, the bacteria spores can't live on the outside and they'll die. But the mycelium, you know, it'll stay in this dormant, dry state for up to a year. So if it's, you know, you can just keep a dried mushroom and then clone it like 9 months later. And I've had success doing that. And yeah, that goes on to tools. Like, what tools do you need? You got the hood or the glove box. What other stuff do you need, especially for cloning? Don't actually know where my scalpel is, but this is a dental pick. And for cloning like turkey tail, if anyone has picked a turkey tail and looked at like the butt of it, like how the hell do you clone that? It's such a small little piece of mycelium. Yeah. So you look at this and you're like, how in the hell do I get a little piece of that? And a dental pick is prime. So anyone play Operation your stuff as a kid? Thanks. So it's the same thing. You want to be like really, really steadfast and get a tiny piece and plop them in, or else the red light goes off, you get buzzed, and then everything's over. And it's fun. It's like fun to get in that zone. Some people will like wear like a little magnifying glass and like really get in there. And for taking a piece, you know, you can take a microscopic piece and put it on an agar. It doesn't need to be a big chunk. As long as there's something on there, it'll grow. It's good to take a big chunk, but you can take the tiniest piece possible and plop it on and it'll still grow. So this is really good, dental pick. A scalpel is really great. It's good to get full stainless steel scalpels, and one that you can plop up and change the blade. I use an alcohol lamp. Some people use a Bacto incinerator. They can be pretty pricey. A Bacto incinerator basically is this like long tube that you can stick your tool in, and it sterilizes your tool red hot like very, very quickly. But sometimes they can be a few $100. I know a lot of my friends have got them for like $50 off eBay, and they just scored, or off Craigslist or something. But an alcohol lamp with 91% alcohol is the way to go. So that's the next thing is alcohol. You want a lot of isopropyl alcohol, and you want 70% and 91%. 91 for the alcohol lamp if you're using it, and then 70% for spraying your arms, spraying your table, spraying your tools, spraying the mushrooms. And how isopropyl alcohol works for sterilization is it basically suffocates the spores or suffocates the bacteria, and then as it's dehydrating, it breaks the cell wall. So why use 70% and not 91? Anyone know?
Dries up quicker. Dries up quicker?
Yeah, so 91 dries up too quick, so it doesn't give it a chance to fully suffocate whatever you're working with. 70% dries slower. It's kind of dark. Like it gives more of a chance to suffocate all the flora of your bench or whatever you're working with. Parafilm is also really good. It can be pretty pricey. I've seen people use like saran wrap, and you know that's a cheaper alternative. This is like sticky. You know what it's made out of?
Paraffin wax.
Paraffin wax. And it allows, you know, I wrap it around the petri dishes, and it allows the culture to still breathe. It keeps the pieces together, prevents it from drying out, and prevents contamination from getting in. You can get a whole big roll. This is 125 feet of it, so it's a lot. We'll work with it in a second, and you'll get used to like not snapping it and breaking it. You want petri dishes, so you can get like a big sterile pack of them. You can get plastic or glass, and you can use like little jelly jars, mason jars as well. The only downside is you can't see in the top of them, and you can just put them in the pressure cooker, sterilize them. And with those, and with these glass ones, you can just put your media in the glass container, and then throw it in your pressure cooker, your autoclave to sterilize in this container. You don't have to have a jar and then pour your plates in front of a hood or in a box. You can pre-pour them. I transitioned to these glass petri plates, but I don't know how I feel about them. A lot of the plastic ones have the connection on the side. These ones I have to parafilm on the bottom. And so I contaminated all my plates getting here because I stacked all my plates and the parafilm melted in my hot car. And then the second I tried to pull them apart, it just ripped off the parafilm and just allowed bacteria to get in there. So a lot of these plates are just, you know, are done. So keep that in mind. I think it'll be good at room temperature, but I was noticing even at room temperature they would stick to each other. Probably not the best design. So hopefully I'm going to do more research and find glass petri dishes that don't have this bottom connection. But this is good if you don't want to throw away plastic and you want to keep reusing your plates. And if these are pretty expensive. If you want a cheaper alternative, use the mason jars, the glass jelly jars.
If you have, instead of parafilm, use the petri dish lids when you traveled?
Say it again?
When you traveled, you have used the petri dish lids instead, without parafilm.
No, the petri dishes do have lids. The parafilm was just to connect the two pieces.
Oh, right. Between the lid and the...
Yeah.
Yeah, I should have just put them all in individual baggies. And a lot of times they'll stick to the bag as well. The parafilm will melt and stick to the side of the bag. But I could have opened it in front of the hood and have no problem. But it was for demo, and now I know.
You mentioned you put your agar recipe straight in the dishes.
Yeah, so if you're working with glass, with a jelly jar or glass petri plates, a lot of times, I don't know if anyone has ever poured agar. Yeah? Biochem people, mushroom growers. With the glass dishes, you don't have to pour it. You can just, mix your formula in a non-sterile environment, pre-pour it in the dishes, and then throw them in your cooker.
So you had that work?
Yeah, totally.
Wow, that didn't boil over.
No.
When you do that technique with the glass petries, with the jars, it won't boil over. But with the glass petries, you just, when the PSI is coming down, it has to be slow. So like instead of cutting your stove, you might do like 75 for 5 minutes, then 50% for 5 minutes. Just want to say that because that did happen to me one time, but it's easily preventable.
Cool.
So when does it boil over? If it's going to boil over?
You want to speak to that?
What was the question?
When does it boil over? If it's going to boil over?
During the cool down.
During the cool down.
Yeah.
It's basically when the pressure changes rapidly, it'll make a liquid boil over. So it could be the same if your overpressure blows open. Expect the liquid to boil over.
I have a electric sterilizer, and I think it has more control over the rapid changes in temperature, so I haven't had any problems with that. But if you're on your stove, like you were talking about, don't shut it off to zero really quickly. So that's something to think about. For pressure cookers, you can get a really cheap canner at Walmart. Don't really support them, but Craigslist is better. If Grandma Jane down the road used to can and now she doesn't, is trying to move her house. You can get a really cheap one off Craigslist. Make sure it's not super old, because a lot of the old pressure cookers don't have a lot of safety and can blow up. And now they changed the design and now it's a lot more safe. But you can get a super cheap old one.